I am noting that everyone is here on the commission in person. Thank you. Second thing, before we get started, I just want to note that I'm going to be pulling item number 3, and we will be discussing it in the near future, but just not today. So first order of business then on our agenda is item number 1, to approve the minutes of the August 3rd, 2021 meeting. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Jean, second by Robinson. Any discussion? Okay, all of those in favor of approving the minutes can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Second up, director's report. Eric, I will flip it over to you.
Yeah, so a few items on the director's report for this month. Seem to be a lot of things going on. There were a couple updates, one on the rain barrel program to kind of wrap that up for the year. Thought it was well received in the community. 297 rain barrels sold. The utility cost to that was $6,625. So I thought that was a successful program. We can certainly bring that back at a future meeting if the commission would like to consider it for 2022 in the spring.
I see Commissioner Forrest. So would you like to make any comments? No.
No, I thought it was great. I appreciate the help that Dawn and others gave us that rainy morning. And I was pleased with that response. I think that showed us that a lot of people were interested.
Agreed. Thank you.
The lead service line replacement program. Yeah, it's just an update as of August 26th, the numbers we had at that time. We do have a resolution too later on in the agenda for the approval of the $320,000. We think that that's a little bit of a stretch, but the best that we can do probably this year. So, and Joe, did you have? Okay. Hey, John.
So we don't seem to be getting.
You're not heard. I am. Guess we gotta charge those guys up.
We don't seem to be getting great participation rates. You know, what are other communities doing that we're not? That, like Green Bay. I know they had that program, but they started out in a much better position than we are in right now. So how do we go about enhancing it? Is it more education? Is it getting the health department in? Because we continually ask for money from DNR, but we don't get enough participation. And we know that lead in the pipes is a health issue. So how do we improve our numbers?
I think the education is fine, but I think until we have a mandatory ordinance, I don't think we're going to get a lot of participation if we leave it up to volunteers.
And Eric, what's the status of that mandate? We've talked about it in the past, but I'm not clear. Are we going to do that at some point in the future? Or propose
Yeah, so right now I have an RFP on the street to hire a consultant to put together the lead service line replacement plan for the city that we've talked about over the last couple of months to try to get proposals on what it's going to take for us to do that. I know the last time we discussed this that before that went in place, the decision was to have a communications plan put together first. So we could try to do that. That kind of goes back to your talking point, John, about education at the same time. And so I think we as staff have discussed this on the water side as far as having drafts brought for the commission, but kind of have a communication plan in place as we discuss those, along with those mandatory ordinances, kind of across the board for other utilities. You know, are they offering incentives to do it at a cost to the utility? Are they not providing any funding, or in just providing like maybe a no interest loan or over a course of a couple of years to pay for it? Or, you know, so other utilities have different options that they've put on the table for doing that. So those are all discussions that the commission will have to have and what direction they want to go. I don't have a timeline right now, Jim, when, you know, that decision will be made, but I think we're on the road at least to start down that path. I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add to that at all.
No, I think you covered it well.
The 320, will we have money left over that we have to give back, or can we keep that and apply it to the coming year?
You know, I think if it's not a lot, Becky, with the DNR, who kind of runs this program, her and I talked via email through this, and, you know, she feels like you know, the city will be able to request again for the next year. Any money that's left over will just go back in the pot, and then we'll make the request again for 2022. So it's a little bit challenging because we were told that the money would actually be available officially this past February, but it's not available till right now. So we were lucky enough that they gave us the verbal, you know, because so we could at least start that process in the spring, communicating with people. But the lateness of getting the funding for the year has been challenging for us too, with a short construction season.
Eric, is there a problem? I understand there's a problem getting plumbers. Is that a problem that they're not getting paid enough, or they're not doing it? Is there not enough money for them? What is the situation there, do you think?
I haven't spoken with the plumber specifically, Don, but my understanding really is it is small work compared to larger work that they can bid and get. And then I think they're running into issues too with skilled labor, you know, and so they only have so many crews and so many people to, you know, and then they spread themselves too thin, you know.
Just one last question, Eric. So the 320 is available now, is it?
Yeah, we've been doing replacements, or residents have been doing replacements, and so we'll get reimbursed for those. What's in the packet? So if you remember, you know, we initially requested 450,000 for the 100, but now that they've actually gotten through to the resolutions, the DNR has, and want to officially provide that forgivable loan, they see that we're only 187,000 into that, so, you know, they have reduced that amount.
And do we plan to spend it the way we've been spending it before, that is, doing these replacements in conjunction with street work?
Yeah, you know, we're doing that where we can and when we can. And again, trying to get the homeowners to volunteer to do that and accept, you know, these grant dollars. So I think that's the most effective way to use the money. But lots of times on the street projects, we don't get enough participation to spend all the money, obviously, so, yeah.
Okay.
I think on the water side too, well 3, yeah, is that what you want to talk about, Joe? Okay. We've been, over the years, we've been on the Superfund site down by Wausau Chemical, we've been working with GHD, they've been the cities or the utilities environmental consultant, and so we had approached them a little over a year ago about, well, maybe 2 years ago now, well, maybe removing Community Well 3 from the water supply and discharging that directly to the river. And the EPA reviewed that. It took a while, but they're on board with that too. The DNR is, we've prepared some plans on how we would do that and submitted to them. GHD is finalizing their report to the DNR and the EPA. And that's their typical annual report with related to the Superfund site, but will include these changes for Community Well 3. So, so it would be nice maybe in 2022 if we get, you know, full approval from them to be able to do this, switch over and disconnect that from the potable water system. Yeah.
Was there other parameters that were tested beside the one that's cited in the report?
Yeah.
And what was the results?
The results were, I mean, the full spectrum that they typically test annually. And they were either non-detect or below any limits that, any groundwater limits. So as far as the testing goes and the groundwater goes, that's been pretty consistent over the last number of years. We haven't had any spikes over the last number of years that I'm aware of, Scott. Have you heard anything? Yeah, or seen anything? No. And so I think I think with that was part of this. We also have to have a contingency plan put together, and so we'll maintain the old air strippers, just in case there is a plume or something that comes in. But according to the environmental consultants, if something is detected in the monitoring wells, typically it won't get to our wells probably for, 10 to 12 months, and could be longer. So it's not an immediate, reaction that has to happen. So we have plenty of warning when that does happen. So, or if it does, but thankfully it has not. Yeah.
Did they do the monitoring around well 6 at the same time? Or was that just exclusive for well 3?
The testing or?
They performed annual monitoring of our city wells as well as the Superfund wells or the smaller wells that they do their annual monitoring on during this time as well.
What, we were talking about 3, but maybe Eric intended that was encompassing that the data was either non-detect or well below groundwater standards. Is that correct? For all of it?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Obviously, some huge news at the last part of your director's report. Big retirement.
Yes, yeah, so, happy to, if anybody has any questions on that, but, at the end, Dave is, gonna be leaving us. So he's made that decision, so, yeah. Goes to, staffing issues, and there is an item on the agenda as well, for later on. Want to try to get some overlap for Dave. Obviously, really appreciate everything that he's done with the utility, for the utility, and even before that with the city. So, appreciate that, Dave. It's been really good working with you. Got a few more months with you, so,
I
yeah.
was just
We're
going
not
to say,
saying
don't
goodbye
push me
yet.
out the door quite yet. We've got
Yeah.
a few months of work to do. But no, I've appreciated the opportunities I've had. There's some misgivings, but I'm going to give it a try, so, thanks.
Mr. Jean.
I'd like to wish Dave good luck in retirement, and I know he asked me some questions about it some time ago.
You failed it, I think.
The wastewater plant is on track to meet the item number 2, the permit limits. But when I was reading through the Donahue report, they said one of the rain events, the plant was able to handle that. Do you have a recollection of what the flow was associated with that? That was in, I would guess in the last month. It must have been a heavy event.
Yeah, I think the heavy event was the night I was in for my hip surgery at the hospital.
Oh,
So I picked well. I didn't have to worry about that. But the peak flows seem to have been less since we've repaired those siphons. And Pat has me rethinking it. I was telling him, no, the water can't jump from the river up into the wastewater plant. But if the river were high enough, and I'd have to compare some elevations, Beck or Hoppy might have a handle on that. But for whatever reason, we don't seem to be hitting quite the high peaks that we do. So I think it was in the 12, 13 range.
okay.
And so, if I remember right. And, yeah, so we got through it, so.
In Sherman Street, there was some smoke that came up through that tunnel system too. That's a dual pipe. Do we have any more knowledge about if there's any plates that are bad or if there's a plate off?
I'll turn and look at Ryan, but I
Oh, I'm seeing hands up over, if you could approach the mic, please.
put him on the spot.
The people at home would love to hear your voice.
I'm Ryan, the collection supervisor. We're waiting for Ryan Jans with Strand and Associates to get back with the full report, as well as he's going to do the presentation in front of everybody here too at that time. That probably with the manhole assessments and everything else too to go with it. So no complete answer for you on that one yet, Joe.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I saw Mr. Robinson's hand.
Okay.
So on a different topic, on the, relative to the public meeting with the citizens, I would hope that next time we do a little bit better job of giving the reasons for the project. I think we kind of skimped on that in going in and explaining why we are. And while NatureWise is part of the equation, it's not necessarily the direction that we've committed to as a commission. So I think that there's a lot of merit in that, particularly from the long-term energy cost and in the impact on greenhouse gases and other things that we could do a little bit better job of selling and setting the stage. So I would, Eric, and if you can work with Clark Dietz and maybe pulling that together, and then try to address some of those concerns that were raised relative to the trees and the setbacks and other things.
Sure, yeah. I think we have been looking at different third parties to bring in. It's a little bit of a challenge to find a third party that doesn't have a vested interest in
Selling something.
in trying to sell something. So I think that I agree with you, John. You know, and but I do think it was good we had the public information, even though we didn't have all the information, you know. But I think there was some good feedback, and they did provide us some direction that, so we kind of have a little bit better idea on where we should go for the next one. And there might be a third one, you know, depending on where we're at and what information we find. So, yeah, we definitely will. I think there'll be more education.
I see two people. Do you want to keep talking about solar?
I do.
Yes, okay. Yes, Mr.
I
Jean.
received a message, as I think the mayor, you may have, and Eric, I think you did as well, from Paul Svetlik. Paul is the head of the neighborhood group where the new water plant is located. There were two main concerns that Paul expressed to me, and I should have shared his email with everyone. I neglected to do that, but he recommended that to deal with technology questions and the kinds of issues that John just raised, that a third party attending the meeting and bringing information and expertise with them would be a good idea. His recommendation was the Midwest Renewable Energy Group, which is out of Amherst and has been working on renewable energy for a long time. I believe that they would be an impartial informational source and an expert in the issue, and would not have anything to sell or any particular position to try to promote. So that was one recommendation. The other question had to do with what he called all the trees being taken down along Bugby Avenue, which was a surprise to me, because looking back on our minutes, I don't see any discussion of that. Perhaps I missed something. So there is a concern on his part, and I think he's just reflecting that of the neighbors out there about the fate of that buffer zone along Bugby between the new water plant and the proposed solar field and the neighbors. I took a look at that area and did some photography over the weekend. That grove of trees, while it's pretty unkempt and is a mixture of species, is quite wide. In other words, it's not just a single row of trees along Bugby. It's quite a deep woods along Bugby. And I guess the question I would have, and this may be totally out of place, but it seems to me that if there are shade issues, if that's the issue, and I'm not understanding that completely, that some of the trees on the backside, the ones facing the solar array, could come down, but there's no reason to completely disrupt the line of trees along Bugby. And then another solution might be to move the solar field further to the north. The question I have, however, is if we lease that property to a third party, such as WPS, do we also give up or yield any control over the landscaping and the fate of those trees? One final point, and John's raised it already, and that's the carbon trade-off. According to what I can find out on the internet, for every 50 trees that you take down, you are canceling out the removal of 1 ton of carbon in a year's time. So there is a trade-off there. And I would just like to make sure the commission has more information on both these matters, and that Mr. Svetlik receive a response from our commission, whether it's in the form of a letter or a phone call or something, to assure him that his concerns will be addressed at the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Jean?
With regard to item 3 under the wastewater, can somebody give me a little background where the gentleman left for? Is he in the public or private sector? And I'm kind of curious what the offer was made for the guy that turned down the job too. Do we know that information, or is there somebody here that can share that?
Well, it's my understanding, kind of secondhand, that Greg took a job with the railroad, and so he's not with the municipality. As to what the exact offer was for the other individual, I don't actually have that information.
Well, he wouldn't have gone through the interview process. What he was offered must have been unexpected or something. I don't understand.
Well, I'm sure the job offer was in the range of what was posted for that position. But, and then I'm trying to refresh my memory quickly. Yeah, I think I heard a comment that he didn't feel it was a good fit for him at this time. So.
Well, I respect what the mayor has done to pull off the agenda item. I understand that she has that privy, and I don't have a problem with that. But this may speak to some of our concerns, and I think we can figure out a creative way to make this all work but we just have to focus on that, and I'll give you, and maybe John will remember this. I'm not sure if you were on the city council at the time I came to the city. You were very close to being on it one way or the other. But the wastewater plant was under orders by the DNR, and with that comes well, at least at that time, and John could probably tell us better, you can't extend a sewer under those conditions. When you're under orders, you cannot extend a sanitary sewer. So I think it's pretty important that we try to come to some way of resolving this, because if you can't extend any pipes, you can't grow the city. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I just fear we need to get staffed up and take care of our facilities that we're investing a ton of money on. So somehow, some way, I think we can figure that out, okay?
We will be working on that diligently.
Just as a note, we lost an employee on both the water side and the sewer side since the last meeting. So, and we've been short-staffed on the sewer utility for over a year now. Water utility has been intermittent, but again, we're short-staffed on the water utility as well. We have certain maintenance requirements that we have to do per DNR, PSC, and the EPA. We are behind on those. We will continue to be behind on those. This is an important issue. We do need to come up with solutions for this, for retention, and then work that into recruitment as well. Or the longer this goes on, this just perpetuates, and every year we just get further and further behind. So,
Eric,
done.
do we do exit interviews?
HR takes care of those. They do have some information. I don't know how much or how much they get, or if every employee does an exit interview. I'm not sure. I usually get feedback from some employees when they leave. You know, it's intermittent though.
I think their information, if possible, I think it would be great if they would all give you an exit interview. Then you would know where you're at as well and what to do to stop all this. We've got to retain these people, and we need to, like Joe said yesterday.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the director's report?
Well, I'm not satisfied that I have an answer for Mr. Svetlik. Or does the commission wish to respond to him?
I'm happy to respond to him. I don't know what the next information meeting will hold, but I'm absolutely willing to look into the Midwest Renewable Energy Group and seeing if they can come and working with Clark Dietz and stuff. I'd be happy to respond to him today, Jim,
Okay.
or to everybody on that email.
And since I was not at the meeting, I was on vacation at the time, what was the reference to trees being cut down along Bugby Avenue? Was that a sweeping statement that someone made, or was it in the plan, or?
It was on the rendering that was put together with the size of the solar array that was put together. It probably took 80% of the trees along Bugby. Yeah.
And is that, well, that can be changed, obviously.
Yeah, there was nothing set in stone on that,
Right.
but you're right, that was a very significant concern from the group, were the trees. But there are shading issues, and so those are things that would have to be looked at too, with the size of the array and moving forward with actual design.
It might be helpful, since from what Paul said to me, the meeting didn't go particularly well from his point of view, that maybe we ask for resident concerns before the meeting so that they have a chance to have some input into the agenda, and we also know what their concerns are before we stand up and give the presentation. That might make sense.
We do provide the opportunity for them to write in comments, when we send the notice out.
Was that
we
true in
can-
this case?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, in view of, again, it might be that you will get more response this time.
Okay.
All right,
I would agree. I
Okay.
think we will, Jim.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we are now moving on to item number 4, discussion and possible action approving a resolution authorizing the execution of the WDNR Principal Forgiven Financial Assistance Agreement for lead service line replacement.
So this is the official resolution that would, so we could start drawing those funds that we've already spent this year, up to $320,000.
I would move we support the resolution.
Okay, I have a motion by Force and a second by Robinson. Sorry, Ms. Herbst, you were a little late to the party. Any discussion on this? I'm not seeing any. All of those in favor of approving the resolution authorizing the WDNR Principal Forgiven Financial Assistance Agreement can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're moving forward. Thank you. We're now into item number 5, discussion and possible action on the policy for payment of overtime to eligible employees.
Yeah, so I brought this forward because this isn't how overtime was paid in the past. And, it came to light in an emergency situation at the utility. And so I see that this is a policy, we're still paying overtime over 8 hours, but how it's identified in the timelines during the day, I'm not sure how that was determined. So right now, we could potentially have people in an emergency situation, but they're getting paid straight time and they're working through the night outside their shift. And obviously that becomes problematic in this type of work environment. So I don't know, if the commission, I would like to take a look at this and potentially make some recommendations on a policy change for this, on how OT is paid. and looked at.
I see the HR director might have some comments.
I was able to do a limited amount of research on this topic before the meeting, and according to my records, this change went into effect in 2013 after Act 10. So in 2013, overtime became, for this particular employee group, became overtime after 8. Prior to that, it was bargained through a union contract. For support employees and basically all other non-exempt employees, it's overtime after 40. And that was also a change that happened after Act 10. Thank you.
So Tony, like the time frame, like midnight to midnight, is that something that's established by law, or is that just something that was established as a policy?
Again, that's something that I didn't have a chance to look
Okay.
into specifically on this topic.
Okay,
So I wouldn't want to comment.
all right.
Mr. Robinson.
Eric, I don't have a problem with your looking into it. My concerns would be, I think we need to tie it into also the 40-hour work week. And look at how that applies, because it appears as if those people worked, till 12 hours a second day, but then didn't come in for their normal shift, so we would have been paying overtime for all of those hours. So I think you have to somehow balance that with, the 8-hour day and the 40-hour work week, so that we've got an obligation to the ratepayers as well. So if you could look at all of those, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot that goes into this. And so, and I think all of that needs to be looked at.
Mr. Jean.
I can't remember how DPW was paid when they got called in to do like plowing, and so I think that might be a twist here, but I can't remember the details of that, so, because they typically would come, I don't know if it was 11 o'clock or midnight, they came after that, then that was part of the next day, but I can't remember the details of that.
I think Tony has an idea how that happens.
Sure. So currently DPW and the utilities are being reimbursed the same way. So we have a couple of things that are in play here. The first is call-in pay. And the call-in pay says if you go home and we call you back, you get paid for at least 2 hours or however long you worked, whichever is greater. For overtime, you get overtime after 8 until it passes midnight, at which point it goes to straight time because you're into your next work day. Unless you've worked more than 8 total, at which point it goes back to overtime for that more than 8 in a row. So it's a process.
Were these people called in that I think they went home and then they got called back, didn't they?
Yes, but the
Yep.
only thing that call-in pay does is reassure, I believe they were here for more than 2 hours, so call-in pay essentially becomes moot at that point. Because call-in pay says if we call you in for a half hour, we pay you for at least 2 hours.
I know, I thought what you said, but maybe you didn't say that or didn't mean to say that, I don't know which, but I thought in call-in, they got paid for whatever time they worked.
Unless it's less than 2 hours, at which point you get at least 2 hours. So if a utility person goes home
Yes,
and then comes back for an hour and leaves again, we pay them for 2 hours.
right, but let's say they get called in at 9 and they work till 2 in the morning. What happens then?
They would get overtime, if they worked a full 8 hours, from 9 till midnight, they get overtime. At midnight, it becomes straight time until they exceed 8 total again.
Right.
At
No,
which point they go back to overtime earlier, even though they didn't do 8 in that calendar day. We gave them 8 because it's more than 8 in a row.
Okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Herbst.
To me, this system sounds very, very complicated, and do you think perhaps it might have something to do with retention of the employees? I mean, this sounds wacky to me.
Sure. Yeah, the federal standard under Fair Labor Standards Act is overtime after 40. And so, yeah, that is a lot simpler. It's hard for me to figure out why exactly we deviated from Fair Labor Standards Act, and that's one of the things that I'm looking into. Unfortunately, the records regarding it for what the business reason was for that change, I don't have a lot in my notes because that was under a previous director. I wouldn't be surprised if retention weren't a flag that was waved when they asked for this to be treated differently, but I couldn't say that for sure.
Okay. Any other questions, or are we comfortable moving ahead with this? Do we need official action, or are we just expecting it? Okay, we will expect it then at a future meeting.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, we are moving on to item number 6, discussion and possible action, authorizing the hire of a wastewater superintendent to overlap and shadow the current superintendent for up to 6 months prior to retirement. I guess, do you want to give a little chat before we entertain a motion?
Sure. I think one of the things, that we always struggle with is, the succession planning and kind of that transition. And so, right now, Dave will be working towards through the end of the year, and there'll be some overlap, but we're not necessarily always funded for overlap or approved for overlap, I should say. And the utility, funding-wise, we're okay. It's just, this is for the authorization to hire somebody before Dave is actually gone, so we have overlap with kind of education and working with Dave with a new employee.
Mr. Forrest?
That sounds like an excellent policy. Are you looking for a motion?
Yes.
I would move to approve.
All right, we have a motion from Forrest, second from Herbst, to authorize the hiring of a wastewater superintendent to overlap and shadow our current superintendent. Any more discussion here?
Is there a time period? Is that a month, 2 months, 3 months? What are you looking at?
Up to 6 months.
Does it say up to 6?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Withdraw the question.
It's okay, we got it answered. Any other okay, all of those in favor of authorizing the hiring of a wastewater superintendent to overlap and shadow the current superintendent for up to 6 months prior to retirement can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? All right, that passes. All right, I guess the last item on our agenda is to adjourn. I have a motion by Herbst and a second by Robinson. Thank you, everyone.